Llorona is a horror game I've developed for the Latinos Unidos Gamejam 2020. In this devlog, I want to talk about the story and research I did and about the love I have for this project. Some time ago, I made a little horror game slash experiment with Game Boy graphics and I regained my love for horror games because of that. I made a video about it explaining why I think the horror genre lost me in the 2000s and how it got me back a few months ago. Since then, I wanted to work on another horror game, something a little bit more ambitious, and since it's Spooktober, I felt that it was the right time to try. Then I came across the Unidos Gamejam 2020, a game jam for the Latino community celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, with sponsors from big companies and a pool prize for the finalists. It's a pretty cool jam and the community is pretty chill. Anyway, at first I wasn't sure if I wanted to join, so first I joined the Discord server to see if I clicked with the community. And yes, I like the idea of a community of people from any Latin American background who works or wants to work or is interested in the gaming industry as a whole. So I decided to enter the jam and see what happens. I decided to make a game about Llorona. I believe Mexico, and probably Latin America as well, is a place full of creatures, ghosts, spirits, and folklore, enough to compete with Asian horror and Asian folklore if you ask me. Mexico is a creepy place with a creepy culture. We celebrate death every year. There's a type of bread that is in a form of a skeleton called bread of the dead. People paint their faces as skeleton called Catrines. Hell, the Aztecs had an instrument they played in battle that sounds like people screaming in hell. Listen to this. By the way, they sell these things on the streets of Mexico City. Imagine an army of people dressed like this marching to your village while you hear this. Mexico has a creepy culture and a weird relationship with death. There's ghosts everywhere. Every Mexican has a ghost story to tell. Whether you believe it or not, those stories are awesome and spooky. I mean, doing the research, I came across spirits such as Xtab, the Mayan goddess of death. I don't know how it's pronounced though, even though I'm Mexican. And she's always represented as a hanged woman. Yes, a hanged woman. And that's a goddess. And there's also Xtabai, the spirit of a woman who seduces men and kills them, which is a story that probably evolved from Xtab over time. I want to explore more of these kinds of stories in the future. Another favorite of mine is Pascualita, the moving mannequin. And this is a good segue to the next part, the making of Llorona. I had to do some research because I wanted a game inspired by Llorona, but I wanted to mix real history and real places with the story of La Llorona. I wanted something more creepy, more silent, and more realistic. So first I needed to pick one Llorona story. This is a folk tale that exists all across Mexico and probably other countries. There's a lot of backstories for this ghost, and there's no real canon. Some say she killed her children and then killed herself. Some say somebody else killed her and her children. I picked the story where she's a woman with psychological problems married to a workaholic husband in a time where mental health wasn't really a thing. So she snaps and kills her children out of jealousy because her husband pays attention to them and neglects attention to her. Now I needed characters, names, places. I grew up in the middle class in a small town in northern Mexico. In my hometown, there's this house called La Quinta Touche. I remember this house vividly since I was a little kid. We would drive next to it every time we went to my aunt's house. I remember passing next to it and feeling eerie. Then later on around high school, I think, I did some research on the house for some history class or something. And let me tell you, it has a really interesting story. So the house was designed by an English architect, and the owner was a man called Jacobo Touche. The house literally, and I'm not kidding, was built on top of a graveyard. And this is 100% true. You can do the research yourself if you can read Spanish. During the Mexican Revolution, the Touche family moved out of the city, and Pancho Villa took it and used it as a hospital for injured soldiers. So the house has seen a lot of death. The guy who actually started the revolution, Toribio Ortega, died there as well. And the owner of the house lost it in a card game, believe it or not. All of this actually happened. And for these reasons, the house got the nickname the House of Tears. That town has a lot of stories and legends from the revolution, since it's where all started back then. But another thing I wanted to integrate into my game was Pascualita, the most beautiful bride. The story, or one of the versions of it, goes like this. There's a businesswoman who owns a store that sells wedding dresses. She has a beautiful daughter who is about to get married to a handsome gentleman. But just before the wedding, she gets stung by a scorpion and dies. The store owner can't handle the loss, and she embalms her daughter's corpse and turns her into a mannequin to display at the front store so she can always see her. This mannequin is called Pascualita by locals and has been seen moving by itself by many, or following people with her eyes.
Estoy aquí con Pablo y la Pascualita. Venimos a visitar aquí en Chihuahua. Pueden ver el estudio, está muy chido. ¿Viste eso? Está chido. ¿Viste eso?
She's scary and she's creepy, but locals, including myself, have a lot of love, pride and respect for her. Until they change her for another mannequin, but that's a story for another time. Anyway, I want to do a game just about Pascualita in the future, but for now, since I want her in the game, I use her as a texture. Llorona's face is actually Pascualita's, but stretched to be creepier. I also hanged a picture of her inside the house. After all that research, I started to work. I modeled the house. It's not 100% accurate since I don't have a reference for how it looks on the inside. Then I met Llorona. I wanted this to have a retro PlayStation kind of look that made the modeling easy but the texturing harder, since every texture had to be small, between 128 by 128 pixels or 256 by 256. Drawing them was kind of difficult, however, I came across a technique using GIMP to make everything quicker. First you make the texture in HD, like 1K, then you shrink it to 128 or 256, depending on what fits you better. Then in GIMP you use the sharpen filter, and voila! I'm not sure if there's a better way or an easier way, but I figured out this way of doing things was working fine for the art style I wanted to achieve. After that, I opened Godot and pretty much added furniture to the house. I modified some models from opengameart.com and some textures. Once the general layout of the house was ready, I started on the game itself. First, I wrote the story I wanted to tell in a bunch of letters that the characters are sending each other, and in a bunch of diary pages from my Llorona that I decided to name Carolina. I asked a friend of mine who is an audio engineer to help me out recording the voice acting and cleaning up some sounds. Another friend wanted to be Llorona, and one Saturday we recorded all the sounds and voices we needed. My engineer friend was great as Father Guzman. I wanted a real thick Mexican accent in the English version, and he delivered.
This is as far as I can go with you, my child. Beyond lies godless lands.
And my friend who played Llorona was amazing as well. I wanted a believable crying and not the "ay mis hijos" scream that Llorona usually does in other media. And she delivered. She was doing all kinds of realistic crying, and then she also did some creepy kid whispers. Congrats to you guys, you did an amazing job. Then I had to build a spook system. I needed a way to spook the player exactly when I wanted. For this, I needed to track where the player is looking at all time. I don't want to get too technical, but basically I used a ray cast, an invisible ray that comes out of the center of the camera, and when it touches something, it checks if it's a spook. If it is a spook and you're in the correct position, then it runs the code for the spook. Sometimes it's just a sound, sometimes it's a shadow, or Llorona walking by. With the spook system ready, I moved on to the puzzles. I got inspired by Resident Evil 2, one of my favorite games of all time. There's a fireplace puzzle and keys with the shapes of car suits. And you know, in Resident Evil, this doesn't make any sense at all. It's a freaking police station, not a casino. However, in my game, the former owner of the house is the owner of a casino. So here it makes perfect sense that the house would have gambling themed doors and keys. Finally, I integrated all of it and fixed a bunch of bugs, and everything was good to go. I'm really happy with the end result. I really enjoyed doing the research, integrating everything together and putting the work to do something creepy. To be honest, there were nights that I was dreaming with Llorona or Pascualita because I stayed up night working on this, and I saw her face so much that it stuck into my mind. And for someone like me who enjoys getting spooked, that was an amazing feeling. For now, I hope you guys are enjoying my game and getting spooked and learning a thing or two about the stories we tell in Mexico. Turns out my game won the prize for the best game overall in the jam. And I have to again thank my buddies who helped me with audio and voice acting also. Also, I want to tell you guys, the secret to win a jam is to just enter a bunch of jams. I entered 4 jams, I think, before winning this one. That way I got a good feel on what I can achieve in a next amount of time and how to work really fast and find shortcuts. Like for me, the free pre-made assets for furniture was essential to make the house feel real. And that's pretty much it. That's the secret. I don't know what else to say. I think the fact that I did 3 jams in a row before this one gave me enough tools and knowledge to make a good enough game in a few weeks that can actually compete for the prize. That's all for today, guys. I'm going to upload more videos on my next project that it's going to be a first-person shooter that I'm working. It's also a first-person shooter with a PS1 aesthetic, kind of inspired by games like Turok or GoldenEye in the N64, and also Alien Trilogy on PlayStation. My first devlog is going to be up next week, so stay tuned and subscribe for more. Thank you, good night, bye bye.